Well, good morning, folks. I'm Jack Murphy. I had to wait till a minute after 10 so that my grandfather clock would stop chiming. Welcome to our Fireside Chat. This is Fireside Chat number 7, and proving that time does fly. I'm chair of the North Fulton Improvement Network, and I am just going to do an introduction and then a little close. We have a very exciting program today. This opportunity to talk to frontline practitioners on some of the challenges they face with workforce is going to be very, very interesting and very rewarding, I think, for all of us. This is being recorded so that we can pass it along. We post it on our website. Or actually on our YouTube channel. Look forward to being able to share this with other people. We are going to try to handle as many questions as we can during the session or after the session or at the conclusion of the session. So please put questions in the chat box.
I'll print 2 off.
Or please use mute as often as you can when you're not going to ask a question. This is the second one of our series that's devoted completely to workforce, and as the next one will be, as you'll hear. So without further ado, let me just move to the next slide and talk and introduce my colleague, Nancy Diamond. Nancy is a project manager with Schmidt & Associates Development Group. She's a real estate group. She's also a board member of Star House and Wellstar North Fulton. She's on the advisory board of NFCC as well. And a former city councilwoman. Nancy is a great asset. Nancy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jack. I want to start with kind of a recap as to what we're about and why we're talking about this. MIT does this living wage calculator that is separated by county that kind of gives a cost of living index for what it would be in Fulton County for our purposes. And if you look at this with 2 parents both working with 2 children, it's a pretty bare bones budget. That food budget is about $25 a day for 4 people. Childcare is about $150 a week for each child. And housing is a little under $1,200 a month, which is virtually impossible in North Fulton County. As we've seen over time, Fulton County data that is often what we can get is not indicative of North Fulton County. So in looking at this, you can see that $90,000 before taxes for a family to live in Fulton County. And that is a good bit more than the essential worker paycheck is in most areas. That's usually in the 30 to 40 range. 45 for each of them is going to be on the high end. That people who are making less than to manage things, you're going to see there's nothing in here for savings, nothing for student loans, nothing for even that marginal car repair, medical bill. There's just not a lot of room here. And this was all pre-pandemic. So we know that out of a little less than 150,000 households in Fulton County, in North Fulton County, that a little over a third of them are what we call financially vulnerable. And we measure that with how much percentage of their income goes to housing, how their ability to pay those bills, and how that all shakes out. So we know that a lot of the reason people come to us in North Fulton to live, to invest, to visit are because of our great schools, our great entertainment, our great venues, the setting, the parks, and the medical care. And all of those businesses are dependent on essential workers. So not so many months ago, we were on little roadshow to various groups explaining what essential workers are. We have not had to do that since the pandemic. Everybody's pretty clear on that. But basically, these are a workforce that is not going to make as what is comfortably a living wage in Fulton County. Consequently, it can be difficult to find staff. And as wonderful as our groups are, we don't have enough staff to continue the great work that's happening. So we have two guests with us today that I'm really excited about, who are on the front lines of this, as Jack said, bringing those services to us and figuring out a way to keep it on the track in the challenging times. So Andy Williams is our Executive Director of Visit Roswell. He took over in 2019, and this was formerly the Roswell Convention and Visitors Bureau. And Visit Roswell incorporates advertising and marketing, basically to bring, as they said, heads in beds and bring visitors to the area. And because we're a North Fulton based group, it's important to know how closely these organizations work together. All the different CVBs in North Fulton work really well together to leverage advertising and bring more people to the area. And we also have Ryan Pernice, who's the founder of RO Hospitality, better known to you as the wonderful team behind Table in Maine and Osteria Matoni in Roswell and Coalition Food and Beverage in Alpharetta. And as a native Roswell kid, I always say, he's been on the front lines of advocating for small businesses, not just restaurants, but certainly a leading voice in this area. So I'd like to turn it over first to Andy, because he's got some cool data to share with us.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I think to start off, I'll really kind of just get into some fundamentals of tourism and why destination marketing organizations are vital to the success of an organization and a community, and really to the success of, I think, moving destinations forward. To give you a little bit of background, we are a Convention and Visitors Bureau, oftentimes referred to as a destination marketing organization. And as Nancy mentioned, our number one goal is to drive transient business into the community. We want to get people here really exploring our amenities, basically creating as many transactions out in the community as we can, whether that's dining in our restaurants, staying in our hotels, visiting our parks, going to our special events, taking in our historic assets, and things of that nature. It is having people come to the community to really embrace everything that we offer and to influence the economic vitality of the community through tourism visitation. And at the fundamental level, tourism can oftentimes be described as travel from 50 miles or beyond, if we want to really kind of simplify it. But as the pandemic has shown, we really shifted gears, and there's been a much more hyper-local focus, I would say, on tourism, and not only working to get the messaging out to our local businesses and our local residents in how critical it was to support one another, but also those from the surrounding communities that perhaps weren't comfortable with traveling greater distances. Perhaps they were limited. We all know during the shutdowns there were mandates in place that really kind of kept people home in that regard. But in a healthy year, when things are normal, our ultimate goal is to drive people from outside of the community. And we focus on feeder cities and drive markets, places like Chattanooga, Birmingham, Savannah, Greenville, Raleigh, places that, you could fly into Atlanta and treat Roswell as a hub and spoke option to come up, or you could drive directly to us to experience the destination. We specifically in the local area here really focus on three market segments. That's the leisure visitor. So those that are coming into town to just take in the breweries, the restaurants, perhaps a special event. They want a weekend getaway, maybe a weekend away from the kids. They're visiting friends and family. Really anything that brings people in just to have a good time in the community. We also focus on group business. So these are the individuals coming into town for weddings, bat and bar mitzvahs, family reunions, things of that nature. And then the corporate sector also. So during midweek, which is obviously a critical time to keep hotels busy, and restaurants and our other assets busy, we focus on business transient. And these are your individuals that are coming in town to conduct appointments and to go to their company headquarters or their branches. And so primarily they're focused on business. And then secondarily, they'll go out and grab a bite to eat and maybe visit some of the other assets in the community. But tourism is big business. It's big business, and it's highly sought after business because these are the individuals that are coming into town, creating economic impact, and then leaving. And our ultimate goal is, they tell their friends, they tell their family, they influence visitation from an outside audience to get them to come into the community to take in everything that we have to offer, but also they become repeat visitors. The easiest customer to get is the one that keeps coming back, that you don't have to market to because they're fans of what we have to offer. And at the state level, just to kind of communicate how vital tourism is, you can see in a healthy year, these are numbers from 2019, the amount of millions of dollars in domestic, or rather billions of dollars in economic impact. You can see the amount of people that come in, 150.9 million in domestic visitation, 1.4 in international. Obviously, that halted the past year, and we've certainly seen the effects of that. But at the end of the day, tourism drives so much visitor spending that in the state of Georgia, if tourism went away, each household would have to be taxed an additional $919 per year. Now, if we kind of focus in on Fulton County, what we'd really love to do is focus in on the actual municipalities, the specific cities. But that's we're working with the state on that. That might be something that comes down the pike one day. But let's look at Fulton County specifically. Direct tourist spending, $10,402,000. Job supported, nearly 70,000. These are your frontline workers. These are your hoteliers, your restaurateurs, your private events, your concert venues, music venues, performing arts, things of that nature. Payroll supports, you can see the millions of dollars in payroll. And then let's look at the actual state tax revenues, 531 million, and then local tax revenues, things like the occupancy tax and the actual taxes that are generated through visitation to our establishments, 300 million. I mean, we're talking big business. And specifically, if hospitality didn't exist in the county, in Fulton County, each household would be taxed an additional $2,027 to make up for that. Take COVID out of everything, because we'll get that in a second here. But unemployment at 3.5 in 2019, without the hospitality sector, you'd be up to 16%. That is how many people the hospitality industry supports. So it is big, big, big business. It is always evolving, always changing. The different communities throughout the North Fulton area have similar but also different focuses. For example, the closer you are to the perimeter area, places like Sandy Springs, do a heavier focus on corporate group business because they've got the hotels and the meeting space to support that. In Roswell, for example, we have more limited hotel space and venue options. So we primarily focus on leisure business. But at the end of the day, it is a diverse mix of audience members that are coming in for tourism. And at the end of the day, they're still creating vital economic influence and impact in the community. And Nancy, I'm happy to talk about the pandemic, or if you want to circle back to that later, we can do that as well.
I had a couple of slides here that you had. I think about the tax impact at this point.
Sure. Yeah, I think we were hit very hard, and so everybody has the breakdown of how Visit Roswell is funded and DMOs are funded. I'll just put it out there. We're not funded by any resident taxes. And so the business that funds us is the business that we bring into town. So we collect what is called a lodging tax or an occupancy tax. Used to be called the hotel motel tax, but that's obviously transitioning with short-term rentals, things like Airbnb. So when you come into Roswell, you pay your sales tax on a hotel room, then you are charged an additional 8%. Through OCGA 481351B, we know that very well. 37.5% of that 8% goes to the city. It can be used for any legal general fund purpose. 43.75 is what is considered restricted, and that is what goes to fund organizations like Visit Roswell. That TCT stands for Tourism, Conferences, and Trade Shows. That is essentially what funds our organization. in order for us to put back marketing efforts for the destination, sales efforts for the destination, all of our film efforts to drive business back into the community. And then 18.75% is reserved and restricted for what is called tourism product development. That's things like creating trails, creating wayfinding signage, building visitor centers, things of that nature. So obviously, when the pandemic happened, all of our restaurants, all of our tourism related partners, our different assets that were so heavily focused in the hospitality industry were drastically affected right off the bat. We know what business looked like in March, April, May, June. Even as we started opening back up, they were drastically affected. And what that meant was that Visit Roswell had an additional responsibility of, I would say, almost even working harder to continue to drive business in more creative ways to those partners. The problem with that is our funding dried up immediately. And so when people stopped visiting the hotel, stopped traveling, corporate business stopped, immediately as of, I think it was March 18th. That meant that there were no funds being pumped into the hotels, which means that check couldn't be remitted to the Convention and Visitors Bureau in the way that it was budgeted. So we had to totally shift gears. And unfortunately, as an organization, we were doing far more with far less. And we had to make some cuts. We downsized staff. We had to make some structural changes. We had to change the way we operated in order to continue to do what we could do for our businesses. And I will tell you, we took a very proactive approach. Ryan and I talked, it seemed like daily for a good bit, and we still talk pretty consistently. What can we do to support the restaurants? What kind of campaigns can we develop? Where are the need times where you need us to drive business? And ultimately it became how do the restaurants and how do our community tourism partners survive this? How do we get through this with the least amount of attrition possible? And then what is that recovery going to look like? And I know that's a big focus of today because now that we have the jobs, now we've got to get these jobs to the workers, and we've got to get the workers incentivized and get them to come back to the table in a number of these different industries. But I will tell you, we've seen the light at the end of the tunnel. Wedding business is coming back. Restaurants have started getting business. Ryan can speak to that in more specifics. For the first time, we've been tracking data from our hotels, and we've actually seen positive results that give us hope. We know that there's a lot of work to be cut out that lies ahead, and there's going to be a lot of conversation around workforce development, but then also immediate workforce needs, getting people back employed. And so where we traditionally focus on destination marketing and generating lead opportunities for our hotels and our venues and our restaurants, now the bigger conversation is how can Visit Roswell work with our partners to be more engaged in those workforce development conversations. And those are occurring all throughout Fulton County with our Greater North Fulton Chamber of Commerce and with a number of the different nonprofits. And Nancy, I don't want to talk too much because I can go on forever, but I'll leave it at that for now, and then can certainly circle back around and get into more detail in a bit.
Great, thank you, Andy. So Brian, I found a quote that said, "You love restaurants because they demand so much of the people who run them."
Yeah,
certainly that is prophetic.
Yeah, now that dynamic has changed a little bit. They might demand too much of the people who run them, but yeah, that's true. So restaurants first attracted me because they're sort of like a cockpit mentality, and we've all been to a restaurant when things are just clicking on a Saturday night, and I had long missed that feeling moving the way they should.
So how hard was it? How was your staffing situation before the pandemic?
We had 130 employees, which consisted of everything from a high school student who might work, 2 shifts a week to our full-time people who have worked with me for 8+ years and are 5 days a week. So that 130 had a lot of wiggle room in there. But heading into the pandemic, we immediately laid off all but 40 of those, which included about 13 managers, and the rest were some of our more tenured full-time staff. So at this point, we're back at about 110. So we've kind of clawed back to where we need to be. Now that 110 is kind of a mix of, it's a lot more part-time, and we're not really at the point in a staffing level where we're pretty set. So we're still down about 30 people to make the restaurants run more smoothly and efficiently.
So how much of that was difficulty hiring and how much was economics?
You know, our industry is going through a heck of a time right now. What I think happened during the pandemic was it was really difficult, and it was difficult because we never really stopped going. Those who were left over, the 40 staff we kept, we sort of joked that it was like being hazed, and you come out of the end of that sort of more tied together from having been through this battle. But we're kind of beat, you know, it's our batteries are drained. We don't have any more gas left in the tank. And so a lot of people having gone through that, the industry had said, okay, well, maybe it's time for me to look at doing something else. Our industry has always pulled from a labor force that was maybe using restaurant work as a means to some other end. You know, they were working in restaurants while they kind of circled around their nursing degree, or they were really trying to make a go, you know, as an actor or something like that. So there's a large swath of people who got through 2020 and said, you know, maybe it is time I really try for that extra degree, or I go back to school, or what have you. I think so. That's one bucket of people. There's another bucket of people who haven't returned to the industry because they're making enough in the extra government subsidies and stimulus that they don't have to work, you know, 2 to 4 shifts a week if it was part-time for them. And then I think there's a third bucket of people who are still hesitant, you know, working in these frontline essential positions. We are more exposed typically than those who work from home. So there are still people who either themselves are worried about contracting any sort of illness or passing it on to their kids or parents. And childcare itself is a huge thing. A lot of kids are still not in school. And if you're a parent who needs to be there to help get their day going, you know, you can't work during the day, or maybe you're too tired at night. So between those different kind of buckets of groups of people, it's very, very difficult. This is the worst hiring situation I've seen in my 25 years of doing this.
So how many open positions do you have right now?
To be fully staffed, we need probably another 20 full-time people. That's about 10 line cooks, and it's the rest split between bartenders and servers. And
if you could find those, you're ready to hire them back now?
Ready to hire them immediately. So if y'all know anybody, send them my way.
That's been one of the dichotomies here, is that nationally we're hearing about all these people that are out of work, and locally that just really isn't, as you know, we've been struggling to get workers for so long. So how did you, are there some jobs that are easier to fill than others? What kind of positions are you looking for?
You know, right now there's not really any position that's super easy to fill. If we put out, we're sort of constantly putting out our recruiting advertisements and whatnot, we will get a trickle of applications for servers and bartenders. Whether those are qualified applications is another story. But for every open position for a line cook, we're lucky to get 1, 2, 3 applications. And the difficulty with our industry right now, which is quite frustrating, is, you know, not only are people reluctant to come back to work, but for every line cook interview we do schedule, I would guess about 40% actually show up for the interview. And then once they show up to the job, it's probably 60% who actually do show up to the job, and about 60% who show up that second day too. So the instances of people just jump and ship, no notice, you know, hey, where are you? You're supposed to show up for your shift today, and nobody answers the phone. That's just crazy abundant right now. It's the worst it's ever.
Do you think it's different for you in North Fulton that it is in some areas?
I think North Fulton makes it harder than it needs to be, because in many cases, the access to public transportation, or even just housing. I mean, you know, we talk a lot in Roswell about all the things we love. Trying to find workforce housing or an affordable place to live for not only the hospitality workers, but, you know, law enforcement, nurses, teachers, is really difficult in a place like Roswell. So how far are my employees willing to travel for, you know, a restaurant industry job that has its own person detriment right now? So we're pulling employees from, in some cases, Atlanta, and it's really a challenge to get up here. So if there were some other opportunities, not only for housing, but also for transportation, I think it would be a lot easier.
So what have you done to be more of an employer of choice? I know you've got a pretty robust set of benefits in place?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'm a really funny guy, so working for me has got its own benefits because we laugh a lot. Then we've got, I think, really good restaurants that are busy. So the restaurants we've got, people are there, they're tipping well. So we are bouncing back very well from the pandemic. We also put together a program called Employalty that offers benefits like paid time off, 401k participation, crucially healthcare, and even free life insurance for people, which is a suite of benefits. You don't know another 3-unit restaurant group that offers benefits like we do. So you get those after a year and full-time status in the company. So all of these things we put together, but I don't know that the restaurant industry labor pool views a lot of those things as strong a benefit as I think they are. Take healthcare. We offer healthcare to about 40 of our employees. Not 40 people take us up on it. So I think it's been a challenge to try and put a package together I think would resonate, but maybe might not in this labor pool. I think it has been more helpful in retaining employees than it has been with attracting new ones. So
you're at a high-end restaurant. I mean, I know your costs are high-end as well, but how difficult would it be for other restaurants to do what you've done as far as benefits and higher wages?
Well, it's not going to be a surprise to anyone that restaurant margins are really thin, right? We're talking about an industry where if you can make a profit, you're doing better than most. So if you can make 5, at most 10%, you're in the top 15, 20% of restaurant operators out there. So restaurants are notoriously low profit. It's not impossible to have these increases, but it does put burden on an industry that typically, we use tips instead of wages. And I don't know if that's going to be the way restaurants do things moving forward. It's easy to say, all right, well, we're just going to have to raise wages, but are people ready to pay $25 for fried chicken? So I think if I could wave a magic wand and, all of the change and discomfort our industry is going to go through over the next 10 years just sort of happens like that, I bet it looks like menu prices are going to increase just all across restaurants. But as this goes and fits and starts, and maybe one restaurant tries it, Danny Meyer's group, Union Square Hospitality Group, tried to do away with tipping with very mixed results. Americans like to tip. It is deeply ingrained in how we experience restaurants. So it isn't change that's going to come overnight. We're really struggling with, okay, things like the $15 minimum wage. I get it. I see why that's important to start the conversation. I don't know that our guests are willing to pay $25 for fried chicken or pizza. So if we do that tomorrow, do I just have all my revenue dry up again? I'm pretty gun shy about that these days.
So what is the pay scale for workers? I know that's a lot of levels, but.
Yeah, typically, our servers are making definitely at least $30 an hour and up. Our bartenders are making at least $30 and up, depending on gratuities for that night. So they're doing pretty well. We have kitchen staff who may start anywhere across the industry. You may start, from 10 to 15 and go up to 20 or so. So that's about the pay scale for back of house staff.
So what's the typical profile of an employee that you're looking for? What's your ideal person look like as far as age, stage?
Yeah, sure. So, it depends for every restaurant. If you go into Atlanta, they will pull less high schoolers than we do, but we're in Roswell, right? So we like to recruit from high schools. We do a lot of what I call first job training, which is show up to work on time and wear your uniform, and you have to iron it every once in a while. Experience in light concepts and a willingness to work. I appreciate in restaurants that I think we may be one of the last true bastions of the importance of work ethic. And I don't really care what your education or even what your work experience is. I can teach you what you need to know. And if you're willing to work, then in restaurants, you are rewarded by work ethic. I think that's one of the things we still rest on that many other industries might not. So generally, we're looking for show up with a smile. I can't teach you to want to make people happy, but if you do that, we can fill in the rest. Experience is great. Education in a culinary school or in a culinary background is great. I don't really look for that. But when you're interviewing with me, if you can carry on a conversation, that's a good start.
Yes, well, I think Jack, I'm going to ask Jack to step in here. I think there's some questions, but I can't see them. So I'm going to
There was a question that I think you touched on a little bit, but Ryan, are you having to increase pay in order to recruit staff?
We are inching pay up. We're trying to figure out how this works. You know, I don't think it's as simple as, put yourself in my shoes. If I start advertising, hey, we instituted a company-wide $15 minimum wage. We are having this conversation about how we make this work, because when I hear the argument of no one should work 40 hours a week and still live in poverty, that's right. I agree with that. But if we institute a $15 minimum wage, there goes my profit margin. Do I then have to increase all the other employees who are working above $15? Do they then say, well, I'm at $16, how come I didn't get a bump too? Are we talking about a $15 minimum wage for a high school food runner who just brings food from point A to point B and works 1 day a week? Is that also included in this? So all of these are huge questions that fundamentally alter the economics of how a restaurant works. And I can't figure out a way to institute those changes without some pretty huge menu price increases that I don't know that people are ready for. And everyone to a man, to a woman will agree people should be paid an appropriate wage to live. Everyone will agree with that. But I get that first 1-star Yelp review about how expensive my fried chicken is. And I'm telling you, there are some people who don't get how this works. You know, people will say, I'm willing to pay more if tipping is done away with. Well, many places have rolled that out and it hasn't worked. It just hasn't. So until there is some help with the deep-seated structural change that needs to happen, you know, I don't know if all restaurants can get together and go, okay, tomorrow is the day. We're all going to raise menu prices by $2 and we're all going to start to pay more. That's just not how it works. So it's a real thorny problem. And we are going to go through some difficult times as we try and figure this out.
I will say, we won't do a poll here, but we did have a vote for one person who said they would pay $25 for your fried chicken. So
that's good. Let me know when you come in next. I will be. You know, our fried chicken's already, I think it's $21. We have increased the price on our fried chicken in order to not have to raise prices on the rest of the menu, because things ain't getting cheaper, and you know, rent on Canton Street's not nothing. So, you know, there are things we can do. I've considered maybe I make the fried chicken $25 and include a little note that says this fried chicken's too expensive. I agree. But this $25 is going to help me pay my back of house staff in particular a livable wage. I don't know if people know this, but for tips, if it's a tip that you write in, so I give you a bill for 20 bucks and you fill in the tip, I can't distribute that money however I want. I'm limited by law by how I'm able to share that with other employees. So currently I can use what's called a tip pool to include some of your tip to both the server who took care of your table, and in some cases, perhaps the bartender gets a tip of that because they made your drinks. The busser gets a bit of that because they cleared your table. But an employee needs to be directly involved in the service experience in order for them to share in that gratuity. I cannot take your tip and give it to the back of house. Now, if it's a service charge, I can. So if you have no control over the tip and I say, hey, your bill is 20 and you have to pay me a 20% service charge, any additional tip is welcome, then I can share that service charge. So there's some restaurants who are being innovative and saying, we're no longer doing tipping, it's all service charge. And then I can share those tips. Well, now my servers are going to feel some kind of way about how their gratuity then goes down. They will perceive that a certain way. So there's all these, you know, links in and out here. It's a very, very complicated situation.
Changing human behavior is always a fun lift. We talked a little bit about public transportation, and I'm not going to ask either of you to weigh in on T-Splost and the political stuff, but how much difference in your industry, because of your hours, would public transportation make? How much would more access routes make versus the hours that generally those things operate?
I'll kind of keep it high level. And I think at the end of the day, the more access people have, you know, to their jobs, the better it is. And I guess the better chance you stand to eliminate burnout. And if we're, you know, Ryan says he's pulling people up from Atlanta, and I know there are people coming from Canton and from, you know, North Forsyth County to come to work because they can't live here, you only do that for so long before you get burnt out and decide this isn't worth it. And I would say even outside of, like food service workers and hotel, I mean, I did this job before Roswell, where my job was based in Midtown, and we purchased a house up in North Fulton County, which was pretty much 3 miles south of the North Georgia Premium Outlets. And so for every day, I drove from North Forsyth County all the way to Midtown, and I calculated it was 3 hours in my car a day. And the only way I was able to get through that was because I looked at the whole thing as a business deal. Hey, we're going to buy a house for cheap or cheaper, and then we're going to turn around and sell it, make money off of it. And it's potentially going to get us into a position where we can afford to live closer to the city. But it was killer. And, I know that it had a direct impact on, probably my mood, the amount of work I was able to get done. So then you put yourself in that situation where you got, individuals that perhaps can't get to where they don't have consistent transportation. They don't have access to transportation to get them to their job. And then you obviously, as a part of that, you start seeing turnover, which puts more pressure on Ryan, restaurateurs, hospitality professionals to have to continuously go out to recruit, have interviews, conduct interviews, and so it certainly is a burden. And I would say in an ideal world, we're able to provide a place where people can, live, and then whether it's getting on MARTA, getting on a bus, or having better access to whatever transportation needs, go 5 minutes and work and then come home, because at the end of the day, that's less time they have on the road, more time they have with their families, more time they have, doing things related to education. And it certainly has an impact. And Ryan, if you want to jump in on that, go ahead.
Yeah, just to sort of bring that, down to the road, no pun intended, when we're talking about transportation, what that means in our industry is that, a dishwasher who may work for us comes up from Atlanta, gets out of work at 11 or 11:30. And if they miss that bus, how does that person get home from Roswell? So I think we could be smarter about how we allocate bus routes. And if we know a bus route services restaurant industry workers, they need to run until well after closing time. So that's one, to say nothing of the fact of trying to deal with public transportation during a pandemic is a horrific challenge where you literally take your life into your hands to use the bus. So yeah, I think that we could be much better connected and better focused on how public transportation enables a workforce to get where they need to go. It would make my world a lot easier.
So same kind of thing on childcare. Do you feel like there are people you could hire if there was evening childcare? Is that a workforce you're able to know that you could tap into, or do you feel like you're?
Yes, is the short answer to that. I think anything we can do that makes it easier for working parents to work is something that we need to consider.
Jack, did you have anything before I go?
That looks like all the questions that we have. Wait, another one just came in. I was actually just writing down what Ryan said. Anything that we can do to make it easier to get people to work, I think that's really kind of our charge. But no, we don't have any other questions, Nancy.
So I'm going
to raise my hand. I do have a question, and it was too much.
Oh, sure, Graham, go ahead.
Type out on a chat. So I'm Graham Huff with Fulton Education Foundation, and we support the public school students in Fulton County. And one of the main areas of support that we do is in the career path for kids who aren't planning to go to four-year college. And with hospitality and tourism being such a giant market sector in the metro Atlanta area, I think there's a chance to think about how we might partner together to work with these high school kids as they consider a career path, and to provide some training. So it's a pipeline for workforce development for the restaurants and hotels and convention centers. So I just wanted to plant a seed for that. If there's some kind of professional organization that we might talk to about, sitting in on some of these classes for kids who are formally enrolled, or expose older students to the industry as they consider either a college or a career path. So that's sort of half question, half just invitation that we think about how we might coordinate as a community for workforce development and helping out our young people.
Yeah, Graham, I'll appreciate that comment. I can tell you, it seems like that comment and that conversation is kind of continuously picking up steam. I know obviously there's a lot of conversation on different, universities, post-secondary education that now offers degrees in hospitality and tourism. I mean, I graduated from college in 2006, and at the time it was kind of like, if you're serious about recreation, tourism, travel management, things of that, go to Georgia Southern or Clemson. And now, I feel like there are a number of different institutions that are offering degree programs. But even beside that, for those that decide college is not cut out for them, there's a lot of momentum, I think, and steam being gained in the tech school avenue and what that might look like, and really kind of getting people engaged. And I think there's going to be a lot more to come on that. And I think a lot of that is even trickling down into the at the high school level. And I would certainly be on board with really getting in and seeing how we can influence that to make it happen.
Wonderful. One of the important things that we're doing at NFIN is to open up these kind of connections and try to open those doors. But we also want to advocate for the businesses that support our community. So I know we've talked some about that and it may be repetitive, but what if each of you had one thing you wish you could get across to the citizenry of North Fulton? Is there, one thing you would like to change or one thing you'd like to see? If you could just kind of speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest thing is, I guess I'm shocked at how many people don't pay attention to the local government and the things that are actually going on in their communities that affect them, whether they're a resident or, they've got a child in school, they're a business owner. Roswell specifically is a population, I think we're pushing 98,000 now, and tune into our city council meetings. And, if it's in person, 5 people may show up. If it's online, there might be 20 people watching. And just in kind of through anecdotal conversation that I have with my friends and contacts I come into contact with in the community, a lot of people really just don't have a clue. They're happy with what's going on. They're getting the kids to soccer practice, getting them fed at night, getting them bathed and down, and they are hunky-dory living in this community, and they have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. And so for me, it's plug in. I'm not saying individuals have to contribute to watching every single council meeting or any other committee meeting that's taking place throughout the community. And I'm not saying they necessarily have to take even a stance on different things, but I really wish that we were able to get more people to just plug in and be in tune with what's going on, because they are oftentimes really affected much more and impacted much more at the local level than they are perhaps even nationally sometimes. So I wish we could figure out a way, I think, to do a Cliff Notes version of what's going on in our communities to a point that people gravitate to it and don't have to spend 4 hours watching a council meeting. So it's something on my radar for sure. It's an issue, I think, and I would say it's probably not only any community throughout the North Fulton area, I would say statewide and even nationwide, all cities probably have this issue. But at some point, we got to get people to tune into what's going on so that they really have a full understanding of the decisions being made and how that affects them.
Well, and I think that's part of what our goal is, because we don't have a lot of local news coverage. We don't really have that piecemeal bite-sized version of what's happening. Of course, you're preaching to the choir about people coming to meetings. I could usually name whoever was there, and if somebody new came, there was a buzz. Who's here? Who's that? What? When you can name people in the audience of a public meeting, that's kind of unfortunate. Ryan,
yeah, I would say my answer is the same on a hospitality level. So we talk a lot in restaurants about how our dining rooms should be like when you view a swan on a lake. You see a swan and it looks beautiful and graceful and it's this noble animal. But below the surface of the water, its ugly black feet are, kicking and paddling to get it where it needs to go. So our dining rooms are like that. Guests should just see the swan. They shouldn't know some of the turbulence and work that goes into it. But as all of Roswell touts its devotion to its restaurants and Canton Street, and it's such good live, work, play, and it's so fun to go eat at the restaurants, it is getting really hard to keep that swan moving. And we need some help in providing opportunities for help make our restaurant worlds go round, so that we can continue to provide the opportunities that make people love living in Roswell. Running restaurants has never been for the faint of heart, and it's never been easy. But, completely irrespective of what happened in 2020, it's very, very challenging now. And in Roswell, I fear that we're not paying enough attention to how we enable a life and a livelihood for the people who make that possible.
Thank you, that's great. Jack, do you have anything on your thing before?
There's a lot of emphasis on these points. We have an elected state leader on the call, and she mentions that local politics isn't as exciting as national politics. I can tell you that as somebody that follows national politics with sort of an addiction, I am wishing things would be, I'm going to local politics because it is much calmer. And to the point that Andy made, both Milton and Alpharetta have sort of listening sessions coming up. Alpharetta's is next week. I'm going to be out of town, but if you live in either one of those cities, please do go chat, just go see what they talk about. I went to one a couple of months ago and happened to mention to one of the city planners in Alpharetta that the old Bailey Johnson place, on Kimmel Bridge Road, that school that was there would make a great place for workforce housing. And I don't know if he was serious or not, but he said, we've never even thought of that. That's a great idea. Somebody else go talk to Alpharetta next week and say the same thing to him. See if we can start a movement.
Oh, and in those listening sessions, 5 people can skew the percentage of that feedback pretty quickly. Well, thank you guys so much for your insight. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think you're both in a unique position to speak in a way that resonates with North Fulton residents. That not every restaurant is in that position, and certainly your leadership in the CVB. I know Visit Roswell, habits die hard. The CVB model does more with less money than anything I've seen in a business model. I'm continually amazed, and how you guys all work together to pool the advertising dollars. You never would be able to afford a Delta ad on a plane in a magazine on your own, but the collaboration has been really helpful, and I'm hopeful that we can do that on a few other levels. I'd like to talk about the next Fireside Chat, which is Tuesday, May 18th. And it's going to be a little bit different take on what we're doing, the Women in Technology, and he's going to tell us about their Single Mothers program. And I'd also like to invite you to get involved with any of our work groups, but the income and employment meetings are the first Tuesday of the month online. You can go on to improvenorthfulton.org and get to any of that, or you can send us an email and we'll get you set up. Those are all virtual meetings. Anyone can sit in on them, and we do them in each of the service areas. And oops, sorry, that's another thing for another day. But thank you so much, and I'll turn it back over to Jack for final thoughts, since he's the boss.
Thanks, Nancy. Nobody's the boss of this group, but thank you, Ryan and Andy. Your contributions have been extraordinary to especially as somebody that does a lot of work with people in need. To show your compassion and care just confirms what we're doing in NFIN, which is getting nonprofits and businesses to both collaborate to find out how to solve problems in a unique way. So those of you who are on the call that aren't involved and have a creative way of looking at things, please do join us, either the meeting on May 4th or any of the other work groups. They deal with income, transportation, housing, child well-being, and what did I miss? Transportation.
Food and security.
Oh, thank you. Food insecurity. Yes, thank you. That's the co-chair of the Food Insecurity Group, which has been very insightful. When we first started this work with NFIN, we looked at food and said, well, that's become a discretionary issue with people. They wait to spend money on food until, in certain households, until they've paid all the other bills. And we realized that there's much more probably structural things that Tanya and her work group are working on. So thank you all again. Hope to see you in the near future, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.